Good afternoon. At this afternoon's Intelligence Forum's Who Are You podcast, we're very privileged to have Francis Murray, partner and head of financial crime at Seddon's GSC. And I'd like to start by asking Fran, when was it in your life that you had an inkling that you would like to be a lawyer and you made the decision to be a lawyer? And what was it, to continue this line of questions, that made you want to actually pursue financial crime?
Good afternoon, Harry, and thank you for having me. A very interesting question, and one that I'm asked on many occasions. I actually wanted to become a lawyer from the age of 9, unbelievably. And not only a lawyer, but a criminal lawyer. And that's exactly what I went on to do. Um, I don't actually know the reasoning for that. It's something that's always interested me. But following on from my desire to become a lawyer, I decided to study a law degree. I then went on to complete the bar course because my quest was actually to become a barrister and not a solicitor. And following completion of my bar course, I joined a white collar crime boutique firm specializing in high value, multi jurisdictional MTech frauds, also known as carousel frauds. And that was in 2008. And I had some very sage advice from the founding partner at that time, saying that it would be professional suicide to join the junior end of the criminal bar. And he encouraged me to cross qualify as a solicitor, which I did. And after a few exams in accounts and SCA regulation and becoming familiar with FISMA, the Financial Services and Markets Act, I became a solicitor. I was very fortunate at the time. There was a channel to do that in 2010. And I stayed with that firm for 11 years and I became the head of their London office. And from my humble beginnings as a paralegal, compiling schedules for these very complex international frauds, I worked my way up the ladder and I decided that my passion was financial crime. And from then on, I have moved on to firms establishing financial crime departments and being very successful in doing so.
Fran, thank you. And what do you do as the head of financial crime? And who are your clients? Who do you work for?
So, day to day, being the head of financial crime is varied. And I always say that no 2 days are the same in financial crime. I can come into the office in the morning, and within 10 minutes, the course of the day has completely changed. Um, so I oversee complex matters. I have a team of people working alongside me. I strategize and I work on how to get clients out of sometimes sticky situations. But I can also advise on non-contentious matters, which can be slightly more straightforward. Um, but my job doesn't only entail the lawyering, as it were. I have to do lots of business development and marketing. I panel speak, I host roundtables, I speak at intelligence forums, I attend conferences. I have to work on my existing and developing international presence because financial crime is ever changing in that respect. And with issues such as sanctions and landscapes, such as sanctions regimes, but also regulatory regimes, ever changing. I have to make sure I'm up to date with that. So there's lots of legal research involved in my day to day role.
I mean, what aspects of your work do you most relish, and what aspects of your work do you find quite a challenge?
I still relish the ins and outs of being a lawyer and getting into a case, reading into that case, familiarizing myself with a client. Um, I don't do as much of the client facing work as I would like, but that really is something that is most rewarding for me and a good outcome. And that's what we work towards a lot of the time if I'm working on a large, complex case that is potentially long running. For instance, an investigation, we front load that work. We have a proactive approach with a view to derailing. And if I can make sure that that client doesn't face stepping into a courtroom or going near a jury, then I've done a good job. And then the other side of the spectrum is achieving a result in, for instance, challenging an account freezing order. And that not only is something that can be reputationally very damaging, as can any financial crime proceedings, but it can also be business collapsing. And if I can prevent that from happening, I find that equally as rewarding. Um, in terms of what I find a challenge, the ever changing legislation in financial crime, I wouldn't say it's challenging in itself, but it's the fact that from one month to another at the moment, um, it, there are new developments. And that's going from legislation that has been enforced for very many years, and now we're having um, a lot of change. And in March this year, the government published their fraud strategy for 2026 to 2029. So we will see a lot more on the horizon. And you have to make sure that businesses and clients are up to date with the changes to ensure that they are not inadvertently becoming non-compliant and facing repercussions in that respect.
With cryptocurrency, as it's evolved, I mean, somebody like you is possibly, and you'll tell me, sitting there thinking, God, my inbox is going to be absolutely full of work due to this form of financial, I don't know what you call it, investment.
Yes. Very topical at the moment, Harry. Crypto is about to be regulated.
Mm.
And so the FCA have published various guidance pieces on how regulation will look. The gateway for applying for authorization opens this September and closes in February.
Mm.
Um, the aim is to encourage investment in crypto and make it a more credible investment proposition, a more credible investment proposition, more trustworthy investment proposition, because in my line of work, the clients that I have dealt with have largely been investors who have lost life savings in crypto investment schemes. Um, and so you will see a lot of businesses in the crypto world winding down. In terms of my inbox, it will look a lot more like what is compliance looking like in the future as a result of this. Um, I suspect that a lot of firms will have to close down their operations because they simply won't have the appetite, the desire, or the budgets to become authorized. And not only does it mean becoming authorized in the immediate future, it means sustaining that authorization. And again, that's a costly exercise, and you require in-house compliance representatives in order to facilitate that.
A lot of your work, as you said earlier, crosses international borders a series of times. Does that make your life exceedingly complicated? How do you work with that?
I like an exceedingly complicated life, Harry. It does, but it's actually uh, probably stimulated my passion in financial crime. It's always been cross-border, but it's ever more cross-border of late. And I have cases that are investigated overseas, but the client may be resident in the UK, and there are mechanisms, without becoming too technical, of interviewing clients in this jurisdiction in relation to those overseas proceedings. And you will find that there is mutual assistance amongst a number of countries, and that's been encouraged by the government and government initiatives. More so on cracking down on financial crime, but that means the clients that I'm representing are the subject of those mutual relationships evolving. And I have a lot of international connections, lawyers in other jurisdictions that I work alongside in order to work through a lot of these issues. But I wouldn't say that it's making life more complicated. It's making financial crime more joined up, and there is more of it. But it is probably, I wouldn't say exclusively international, but my practice is around 95, 96% international, whether that's UK clients with overseas affairs or vice versa, business interests overseas, but also business interests in the UK or a branch in the UK.
So the last question I've got for you today is, could you explain unexplained wealth orders?
Yes. So an unexplained wealth order is a relatively new instrument that is goes alongside an account freezing order, which is used more frequently. An unexplained wealth order hasn't been used that often. They are applied for by the National Crime Agency, and they have almost always been challenged, sometimes successfully. But it's an order that requires a person to explain how they obtained assets that appear to be disproportionate to their known lawful income. At the time when the legislation was enforced that introduced the unexplained wealth order, I believe everyone would have heard of a case in the press that was heavily reported on of the lady that had a spending spree in Harrods, and multiple credit cards were used in order to facilitate the spending spree in Harrods, and it wasn't clear how this lady had made her wealth, and an order was issued against her. And there have been subsequent iterations of the order in respect to various other cases. But it's, if a person owns property of a significant value, generally worth more than 50,000, their known legitimate income would not reasonably have been sufficient to acquire that property, and the person is either reasonably suspected of involvement in serious crime or is a politically exposed person from outside the UK or connected to one. It doesn't necessarily mean by itself that property is confiscated or that you would be criminally prosecuted and convicted. And I hope that answers your question, Harry.
So, Fran Murray, thank you so much for this interview today. It's deeply appreciated, and thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Harry.